Welcome to Steps to Publishing Your Comprehensible Reader from What's Your Next Step? I'm Annie Ewing.
And I'm Kirsten Plante. In this tutorial, you will learn how to move your word list closer to being a real glossary by finding the hidden entries in your text. When you're watching this video, you probably already have created a word list and cleaned it up. Now you're ready to start thinking about the kind of glossary you want to build. This is step 3 in our series of video tutorials to help you build a glossary step by step for your novel.
So what are those steps again? Step 1 is create a word list. You've done this already, or you can do it now by following the instructions in our word list video with Margarita Perez Garcia. Step 2, sort and clean up the list. In the step 2 video, we showed you how to prevent extra work at a later stage by making your word list as clean and concise as possible. Step 3, find hidden entries. In this step 3 video, we'll look for expressions and word combinations that may have gotten lost in your alphabetized word list, but are key to your story. So you want to include them in your glossary. Step 4, enter meanings. The step 4 video will guide you through decisions that help your glossary provide just the right support for your readers. In assigning meaning to each entry, we may find other hidden entries or notice things we missed or obscured in the cleanup and finding phases. And finally, step 5, transfer and format. Here we'll guide you through the mechanical task of converting your spreadsheet columns into an attractively formatted glossary and transferring it to your manuscript in Microsoft Word. In the process, we'll give you some tips on visual elements that can make or break the user-friendliness of your glossary.
Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of transforming your word list into a glossary, remember the why of what we're doing here. Why do you need a glossary in your language learner novel? You worked hard to make your story so engaging that your readers get completely caught up in the story and they don't want to stop and look something up. So when they do, it's because they absolutely have to understand a particular word to move forward. And while they may think they're stuck on a particular word, it may actually be a combination of words that will provide the understanding they need in this moment. So the glossary has to provide them with just the right meaning as quickly as possible and let them get back to the story. Keeping that why in mind will help us make important decisions at each step along the way as we build our glossary. As with all the steps we suggest in our video tutorials, our goal is to share our insights in a way that you can replicate with your manuscript. Not every writer or glossary creator will do it the way we do. We will give you plenty of food for thought, and you will create a system that best meets your needs and goals.
For the practical videos in this series, we share examples from word lists in French and Spanish. Author Teresa Marama has kindly granted us permission to use her novels La Maison du 13 Rue Verdon in French and La Casa de la Calle Verdon in Spanish as the basis for our glossary. I will show examples in French using Google Sheets and Google Docs.
And I will show examples in MS Word and Excel in Spanish. And everything we show you can be done in both platforms in similar ways.
If you watched our videos for steps 1 and 2, you should now have a word list in a spreadsheet that has been sorted into alphabetical order and cleaned up. For this third step, we will continue to share examples from our word lists in French and Spanish. However, as usual, the types of situations, if not the exact situations we discuss, will be relevant to other languages as well. First, make a copy of your word list and save it as a separate file or a separate tab in your spreadsheet. I've named my step 2 word list, Clean Word List. To copy it, I click on the down arrow on the tab and select Duplicate or Duplicate. Then I rename the new tab, Find Hidden Entries. This is the word list we'll be working with for step 3. Your earlier clean word list may be useful when you want to determine the unique word count of your text, so we don't want to get rid of it just yet.
Let's think through the process that takes us from word list to glossary. Which words to find, where to find them, and how to find them. The word list we have so far is just that, a list of words of all the words that appear in your manuscript. However, a glossary needs to be much more than just single words. A glossary needs to help the reader clarify the meaning of the text. And there are many instances when understanding the meaning of a single word may just not be enough to understand the phrase or the chunk that word is found in. So in our glossary, we need to make those phrases or chunks visible and findable in order to make those meanings transparent. So ultimately, as our word list becomes a glossary, it will contain single words like this one and word combinations that will be hard to understand by simply understanding the individual components of that combination. The single words are already in your word list. So what we're doing in this tutorial is find the hidden combinations and add those to your word list. We use 3 different strategies to find hidden word combinations. First of all, scanning the word list from A to Z to find the specific types of words that should ring a bell.
As you scroll through your word list, you should notice entries that ring a bell in your mind based on your knowledge of the language, your familiarity with the language you used in this manuscript, your experience as a teacher, knowing what is likely to present comprehension challenges for readers who are still learning the language, and your goal as a writer to make your novel accessible to a wide range of readers, many of whom may have a different level and different knowledge of the language than your own students. And when we find those combinations, we add them to the word list. For now, we'll insert all the word combinations we find below the original entry for each word in the expression.
The second thing we do is scan your manuscript for word combinations using the find function. Click on the amplifier glass in the top right of your screen, click again and choose List Matches in Sidebar. There you type the word you're looking for. In this case, it's al. And you see all the instances of al in the manuscript. And you can walk through these to check for word combinations. For example, al día siguiente. You go back to the Excel file, click on the row below al, and then right-click and choose Insert. And there you can type the word combination you found. If we look further, we find al llegar. We repeat the insertion of a new row and add al llegar to the word list.
Finding word combinations with the text analyzer. Many word combinations are not in our word list yet because we've taken only the single words list from the text analyzer. We may have created a couple of word combinations during the cleanup phase when we figured out what to do with unexpected entries. We're now going to look specifically for words that are sometimes or always used in combination with other words, and we will need to decide how and where we'll include them in the glossary. The text analyzer can help us with that because it also creates lists of word combinations that occur in your text more than once, from 2 word combinations to 8 word strings. So let's have a look at some of those lists. In the 6 word list, you'll see that most are random combinations, but there are occasional combinations of words that have meaning you'll want to include in your glossary. For example, non croit pas ses yeux, can't believe her eyes, appears 4 times. That's not random. That's an idiomatic expression that readers should know to fully appreciate this story. And not knowing which part they may look up to find it in the glossary, I'd put it in multiple places. For now, under croit, under en, and under yeux. Here are some others that show up in Text Analyzer that may get lost in the shuffle of a word list because they're made up of small, high-frequency words. but the combinations are often totally opaque to novice readers. You may also find these combinations by scanning the manuscript or by searching on specific usual suspects, as Kirsten shows in the next strategy.
How to recognize bell ringing words and what to do with them.
Words should ring a bell when you know that you've used them in combinations in this text. These may be idiomatic expressions or simply common compound words. Here are examples of words that are always used in combination. Expressions like de repente in Spanish, or il faut, or parce que in French, have words that you never see in any other combination. Repente, faut, parce. So those are words that we consider required combinations. For example, with parce, I'm pretty sure it only ever occurs with que. But just to make sure, I search the text. And I find that it does occur with que and also with QU apostrophe, with the abbreviation for que. Since it never appears on its own, I update the parce entry in my spreadsheet to parce que, and I add an entry for parce que. We'll decide what to do with that later. Then there are words that may appear on their own in the language, but in this text are used only in a combination, like salle de bain in this particular novel, or se da vuelta in the Spanish novel. So I can see from the word analyzer, the Google Doc, and the word list spreadsheet that salle appears 5 times in the text, always in the phrase salle de bain, and bain only occurs 5 times in the same expression. So the reader really only needs to know the meaning of salle de bain to get quickly back to the story. Since we don't know which word is more likely to stump the reader, we'll list the expression under both in the glossary, once under bain and once as an update to the entry for salle, since that's the only way it occurs in this text. And then there are words that in this text may be used alone and are also used in combination. For example, porte appears 59 times in this text, and entrée appears 8 times. Porte meaning door, entrée meaning entrance. However, 5 of those occurrences are in the expression porte d'entrée, which I translate as front door in English. So let's include the expression along with both of its key parts under each word in the glossary. Remember, if a set phrase consists of 2 or more words separated by a space, think about whether each individual word should appear as a separate entry, since we don't know which part of the expression a reader might look up.
Now, prepositions should always ring a bell because they can be combined with so many other words in so many ways. And sometimes preposition is used in Spanish, for example, and will not have a translation in English. Like al día siguiente, which would be the next day and not at the next day, or carte de visite would be a business card, so it will not be found in the translation. And en bas also doesn't have a preposition in the English translation. Sometimes a word combination with a preposition changes one of the words in that combination. For example, deja de fumar. When you add de to deja, then deja means something different. Deja means leaves or leaves behind, and deja de means stops doing something. There are also prepositions whose own meaning changes when they're used in combination with certain other words. For example, a would be to or at, but in combination with pense à, it would be about or of. De qué hablas, de would usually be from or of. When you say de qué hablas, it means about. What are you talking about? And por eso and por qué just are actually, I consider them words, but they are actually word combinations with a completely different meaning from from the separate parts. And again, when a word combination consists of two or more words separated by a space, each individual word should, we think, appear as a main entry in your word list, because you never know what words a reader will be stumped by. Will it, if it sees por eso and it doesn't know what it is, will it look for por or will it look for eso? We don't know. So we want to have por eso as a sub-entry with eso and as a sub-entry with por. It helps me to find the right examples when I already write the most common meanings behind the word in the word list. Keeping these meanings in mind, it's easier to find all instances where the meaning deviates from the most common, or what I call literal meaning. For example, con in Spanish means with, but sueña con means is dreaming about or dreams about. So as I observe the phrases in the text that contain the word con, and I translate the phrases in my head, then I will notice the ones that are different, and I can add those to the word list as a sub-entry.
Single letters should always ring a bell, at least in some languages, because they're often part of a word combination, and they don't often occur as words by themselves. In English, French, Dutch, Gaelic, Italian, Polish, for example, they may be abbreviations for, or may actually be pronouns or articles or particles or possessives or adverbs. Single letters may stand alone or appear with an accompanying hyphen or apostrophe. In every case, you'll need to decide whether and how you want to treat these one-letter entries as parts of combinations in your glossary. For example, when French readers encounter l'heure, the hour, or the time, we can imagine a novice reader who's baffled by this word and wants to look it up in the glossary. But where might they look? Should l'heure appear under L as l'heure or under H as heure, or both? What if there are 38 instances of nouns that start with L apostrophe? Should they all be listed in two places? These are decisions we have to make depending on our audience. We choose to list the L apostrophe, meaning the, under L, then list all the nouns in their places in the alphabet. Each combination may require a new decision. I make a different choice with C apostrophe in French, which means this or it. In this particular text, it appears in two combinations: c'est, it is, this is, and c'était, it was. So I list both of those, and I don't list c'est by itself.
Verbs should ring a bell when you know they may be used reflexively. Like, for example, you see mueve in the word list and you know that it's often used as se mueve. He or she is moving or moves instead of move something else. The same goes for levanta. You can lift up something, or you can stand up and then you say se levanta.
The last one is a simple one. Names should ring a bell. If you have two-word names, and if you're planning to include names in your glossary, be sure to look for any two-word names that may have gotten separated by the text analyzer, since it deletes hyphens and may not know that names like San Andres belong together.
As with all of the steps we share in our tutorials, not every writer and not every glossary maker will follow these steps in sequence. When finding hidden entries, for example, you may already think about how to format entries, which we will address in our last video of this series. Or you may be thinking about how to translate the sub-entries you found, which is the subject of our next video. You decide, and you know how you work best. And we hope this series gives you an idea of what to think about as you develop the reading support for your text.
With this video, you've made some essential decisions about the organization of your glossary, and still we encourage you to remember your underlying why. If your why includes keeping your novel comprehensible, consider these words of wisdom from Lance Piantagini, the master of comprehensible Latin novels. A full glossary certainly helps, but isn't enough. Words need to be recycled often, especially in the beginning, to have a chance of being acquired by all learners, not just the ones with an excellent memory. If your text doesn't recycle its vocab, you should adapt it. So as we mentioned in our last video, don't miss the opportunity to notice when a word or expression only occurs once or twice in your text, and see if you can find ways to provide more repeated exposure. This link and QR code leads you to a handout to accompany this video.
So
tell
tell
us,
us,
what's your next step?